Live for the next hour tonight.
Tackling the thieves, thugs and fraudsters on Britain's transport network. With theft alone up 16%, we're out across the country, looking at the fight back.
This is sending out a clear message that it's not acceptable to commit theft in the transport network.
Caught on camera, the urgent hunt to find these men who used pepper spray to overpower two middle-aged women at a family jeweller's.
I was in terrific pain and my face felt as if it was on fire.
21 years on from the horrific murder of 7-year-old Nikki Allen, detectives are convinced someone watching tonight witnessed what happened and can finally reveal the truth.
I just think of Aisha was murdered, wanting his killer to be caught.
And how a career criminal who thought he was the master of disguise was brought to justice by the most idiotic of mistakes.
What name do you want it made out to, sir?
Craig Townend.
This is Crimewatch. Hello and welcome to Crimewatch. We are live for the next hour with this month's latest crime news and appeals. And the studio, well, it's full of detectives from across the UK and they are ready for your call. But first, let's have a look at what else we have for you tonight. And former policeman Martin Bayfield's here again with more wanted faces and CCTV.
Yes, your chance to track down some people sought by police, including 27-year-old Francis O'Donoghue, who police want to speak to urgently in connection with the shooting of two men 2 weeks ago. If you see him, call 999 immediately. And someone must know where this guy is. Jonathan King Kalea is wanted for this horrendous attack on a couple at a taxi rank in Surrey. And it's worth knowing that you can press your red button at any time until midnight tonight to have another look at all of these faces. And I've got lots more unbelievable CCTV to show you, including these rather rubbish robbers who, despite their best efforts, managed to steal absolutely nothing whatsoever.
And Matthew will also have the latest on how your crucial calls are making a real difference.
Yeah, some incredible results. Crimewatch viewers identified the man responsible for this terrifying hammer attack, in which the victim's skull was fractured.
So was it for Crimewatch, you wouldn't be in prison now.
But we start tonight with a really urgent appeal to find the gang who, at the height of this summer, launched, well, it was a ferocious raid on a small family-run jewellers in the South Wales seaside resort of Porthcawl. It seemed to be a pretty well-planned operation, with the men waiting until there were only 2 female staff members in the shop. They were even cunning enough to take the CCTV camera footage away, but unfortunately for them, there was a backup and the whole attack was caught on camera.
One of them sprayed my face. I was in terrific pain and my face felt as if it was on fire. And I thought, I'm blinded, I'll never see again.
Bought the shop in 1980, didn't take much out of it at all, but ploughed everything back into the business with the idea that when I came to retire, that would be my pension pot. It's an old-fashioned shop based on almost Victorian lines, and we tend to be a shop for everyone. We do hundreds of small jobs, a lot we hardly charge for. I always arrive at the shop about 8:30. I unlock the safes and the girls arrive about 10 to 9, 5 to 9.
Morning, Keith.
I probably see the girls more in the day than I see my wife.
I've worked in the shop 30 years, been friends with Keith for about 40 years. It was just a normal day. Sue and I both arrived at work. Keith was there, he opened the shop. He went off just down the road to the bank.
On the way to the bank, I noticed these three gentlemen. They were smartly dressed, nice trim shirts, trim trousers, the traditional Jewish skull cap, which is not common in this part of the world. Came back from the bank, they were in the shop.
Very unusual face to it. It's an old...
And I thought of visitors to South Wales. I'm always pleased to be nice to visitors, to give
Good morning.
a good impression of Wales.
Are you here for something special?
We look for the watch.
I asked them where they were from, and they said Lithuania.
Yes.
I said, are you on holiday? Oh, yes, we're touring the coast. You know, so we get so many tourists here, there was no reason not to believe them. Keith said, right, I'm going now, because it's his day off on a Wednesday.
I left the shop. The gentleman left at the same time.
You know, if he suspected anything, he wouldn't have left the shop. Not long after, these men came back in again, and they'd been looking at a watch. And Sue said, well, have you come back for the watch? I heard Sue scream, and as I looked up, one of the men was in front of me, and that was it. He'd got this spray, and he sprayed my face and my eyes. Pushed me to the floor, and obviously I was in terrific pain because I couldn't see, and my face felt as if it was on fire. I immediately thought, it's acid, I'm blind, I'll never see again. Sue screamed. I think that's why they taped her mouth, and they taped her wrists like mine. She was over there on her own, but I couldn't hear her, so I didn't know if she was okay or not. I'd got no sense of time. I'd been told we were there for 15 minutes. My thought was, how long is it going to last? When are they going? Is anybody going to see anything through the shop door, which is a glass door? I thought, if I can wash my face, I've got to put something cold on my face.
They targeted the very best stuff, the high quality and the most expensive items.
There was no need for any violence. I'm a great-grandmother, for goodness sake.
I had a frantic phone call from Mary to say that they'd been attacked. So I went over to the shop and discovered the disaster that has befallen us. Sue was trembling, crying. Mary was shaking. I felt sick. Angry and sick.
I'm doubly nervous now, you know. I don't sleep at all. Any little noise and I'm awake. I can't go back to the shop because if anybody strange came in, I'd be jittery all the time, so I just cannot go back.
2 of my shop girls have left, so I'll be closing down. I'm too old to continue. I got no more battles to fight and no more wars to win, so I'm going to finish.
What a terrible shame. Well, Detective Inspector David Rees, who is investigating this attack, is here. with his team tonight. Tell me what you know for certain about these attackers.
Well, as well as the footage that's shown in the clock shop, we've got clear CCTV evidence in a second jeweller shop in Porthcawl from that morning. We believe the suspects are Eastern European, was probably from Lithuania.
As they said, indeed, they mentioned that when they were asked. What about the vehicle they were travelling in, a car, a van, do you know?
Yes, they were seen the day before and in the morning of the incident, driving a stolen VW transporter vehicle, which was displaying stolen Lithuanian number plates. The vehicle has since been recovered and we've seen some vital evidence from that.
Okay.
We believe that the suspects have links in the London area, and I'm appealing to the Eastern European community in the London area. If they know these individuals, to please contact us.
David, we saw the damage that horrible spray thing did. In fact, you've got the actual spray here tonight. You did recover that.
Yes, that's the actual spray. From the manufacturer's website, this apparently is the most potent pepper spray available in the European market. It is a Section 5 firearm, and it's illegal to possess in the UK.
Yeah, it really is a terrible thing. Well, for now, David, thanks very much. Really unbelievable. It's totally unnecessary, the amount of violence that was used. The images, though, are particularly clear. So if you've got an idea who these men are, please do get in touch now. You can call 0500 600 600 to speak directly to one of the team here tonight who are investigating. Calls are free from most landlines. Some networks and mobile operators are going to charge for the calls. The details are on the screen, all the numbers throughout the programme. Over to Martin.
Well, we start tonight's Wanted Faces with Francis O'Donoghue. Police want to speak to the 27-year-old in connection with an incident which happened just over 2 weeks ago in Essex, in which former Team GB boxer Martin Ward and his brother John were shot and seriously injured. O'Donoghue has links to London, Kent and Hertfordshire, as well as Ireland. He's considered to be dangerous, so if you see him or know where he is, just call 999 immediately. Next is Jonathan Joseph, but he also uses the surnames O'Neill, O'Brien and Smith and the street name Nelly. Detectives want to talk to the 32-year-old about an incident during the early hours of New Year's Day this year in which two people had acid thrown in their faces. Joseph has links to Manchester. Number 3 tonight is Lee James Seddon. Police want to speak to him in relation to an armed robbery during which a security guard was threatened with a machete and around £70,000 was stolen. 36-year-old Seddon, who has a 1-inch scar through his left eyebrow, has links across Lancashire and to Manchester. He's considered to be dangerous, so if you see him or know where he is, just call 999. And finally, for now, is convicted sex offender Stephen William Thrower. He's wanted after failing to comply with the terms of his registration. The 45-year-old has links to Harrogate and Bradford, but has previously worked at travelling fairgrounds. He has a variety of tattoos, including a winged horse, a topless woman and an eagle on his left arm, and a swallow, a tiger and a dagger on his right arm. He also has an indentation scar in the centre of his scalp, which is thought to be a result of being hit on the head with a stiletto. Now, all of tonight's faces are on the website, and you can also see them again by pressing the red button on your controls. If you know where they are, call and text the numbers on the screen. Text will be charged at your standard message rate.
OK, it's time now for a roundup of the latest crime news.
Some of the most dangerous prisoners in England and Wales are not being properly risk assessed before they're freed. A report found that 2/3 of the plans they examined to manage the release of those serving life sentences were inadequate. Verna Bryant's daughter Naomi was murdered by a rapist who was serving a life sentence but had been released.
They said that they assessed him and everything, but because he passed his exams and did good things while he was in jail, which he didn't have any choice because he was in prison, they said, oh, he's a good boy, he deserves a chance, and so they let him first into open air and then they released him.
Coronation Street actor Michael Lavelle has been cleared of a number of child sex abuse charges, including rape. Mr. Lavelle, who plays Kevin Webster in the soap, had denied 12 charges in total, telling the jury he was fighting for his life. He's now expected to return to the soap.
We're all delighted, obviously, you know, it's a big weight off everyone's shoulders.
The case has reignited the debate over whether people accused of rape should be granted anonymity, just as complainants are.
Now, a senior detective is expected to face disciplinary charges over the Becky Godden murder case. Detective Superintendent Steve Fulcher from Wiltshire Police didn't follow arrest guidelines when he questioned the suspect in the case, Christopher Halliwell, without taking him to a police station. Halliwell did lead the officer to Miss Godden's body and was subsequently convicted of another murder, but can't now be prosecuted for Miss Godden's death. The detective said he'd made the decision not to take Halliwell to a police station in a bid to appeal to the killer's conscience. Her parents have both expressed opposing views on the officer's actions.
If the man did an honest job, it would never come to this.
I think he should be given a medal for what he's done, not go through all the trauma that he's had.
Well, last week, the head of one of the UK's largest police forces said that more than half of all crimes reported to his officers are not investigated. Sir Peter Fahey, Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police, said his officers were only able to concentrate on about 40% of reported crime. However, he did stress all reports were assessed to see if a line of inquiry existed. Data released in July showed that crimes recorded by police in England and Wales fell by 7% in the year to March 2013.
For us to continue to reduce crime and keep the public safe, there has to be this balance between investigating crime after it's happened and getting on the backs of these active criminals that commit most crime.
Right, some crimes caught on camera now, starting with a series of offences in shops in Plymouth, which all happened on the same day back in February. It's around 10:30 on a Saturday morning and two men walk up to the Spa store in the city's Wolseley Road. The first man, wearing a grey fleece, walks in, followed by his mate in the black hat. After spending a couple of minutes in the shop, the man in grey picks up a paper and takes it to the till to pay. While he's chatting with the shop assistant, his mate makes his way to the back of the shop and into the kitchen area and has a good look around. Out of shot when confronted by a member of staff, he claims to be looking for the loo. The pair then leave, one out of the back door, one out of the front. Half an hour later, they're in the Co-op store in Peveril Park Road. This time, both of them head straight to the staff area. Inside, they have a good look around, trying drawers and rummaging through staff members' bags and purses. The cheeky monkeys even get stuck into a jar of sweets. They leave when a shop worker comes in, after again claiming to have been looking for the toilets. And the last stop for the day is the Spa store in North Hill at about 1:20, and it seems it's third time lucky. The one in the hat heads straight to the back office, where he's able to open the safe and steal a cash box containing $2.5 grand. While he's in the office, the one in grey keeps the shop assistant busy chatting. He clocks his mate is back in the shop, and they both leave a few seconds later. A busy morning, and they never did find a loo. Name them tonight. Inside the Ladybird nightclub in Cardiff during the early hours of a Saturday morning in May. A man in a checked shirt is standing in the lobby area. Look carefully, and you'll see him suddenly, and without reason, punch a fellow clubber. The blow knocks the victim to the floor, fracturing his skull. His attacker then walks off and leaves the club. It was a violent and unprovoked attack, which has caused the victim to lose his hearing. Who is this thug? It's the early hours of a Sunday morning, again in May, on board a train which has stopped at Seven Kings Station in London. A man wearing a padded jacket, tracksuit trousers and trainers gets on board. He spots a woman on her mobile. Suddenly, he grabs it and sprints off. He stole a valuable phone. It's time for you to use yours and tell us his name. Plenty more CCTV still to come, and you can see it all again on the Crimewatch website. Call and text the numbers on your screens.
Now, next month will mark the 21st anniversary of 7-year-old Nikki Allen's murder. She'd been a happy child, growing up in the Weirgarth flats in Sunderland. But on the night of the 7th of October 1992, she went missing. Despite a frantic search, she wasn't found until the following day. Her body was discovered in a disused building near to where she used to play. She had been stabbed 37 times.
I look at Nicky's pictures and try to think about my thoughts, and it just leads to the night when she was murdered. I can imagine probably her last words were shouting, "Mum."
The unsolved murder of Nicky Allen 2 decades ago has never been forgotten by people in Sunderland. The 7-year-old was one of 4 sisters who lived on the Weargarth estate with her mother.
Nicky was the closest out of the 4 children, and she clung beside us all the time. She loved the carnivals, trips with the nursery and school, or playing with her cousins outside.
On October the 7th, 1992, Nicky spent the evening playing with her cousin and her older sister, Stacey.
Girls, I'm just popping out. I'll be 5 minutes. Okay.
Sharon went to her father and stepmother's flat, which was in the same block a short walk away.
My head really hurts. I feel so...
It wasn't long before she was followed by Nicky and her cousin.
Mum, can we go to the park tomorrow?
Sharon told Nicky to go home, promising her she'd be back soon.
And she just walked out the door.
Sharon returned to her flat a short time later and went to check on the children.
I just thought Nicky had went home, so I went down and she wasn't there.
Mum, she didn't come home.
She won't have gone far.
Nicky! 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 Where can she be?
I think after about half an hour I knew there was some tomorrow.
There was a massive search. Local residents joined the police and stayed out all night looking for Nicky.
Okay, if I just have a seat. Right.
The next day, Sharon received the news she'd been dreading.
I was put in a room until they found a body. I think it's Nicky. Can I stop here, please?
"21 years on, detectives are scouring the evidence for new leads.
Well, this investigation's always remained open. We've got teams of detectives working on the inquiry. We're utilising developments in forensic techniques, working with scientists, looking for opportunities. We're reviewing the witness evidence. But most importantly, I remain convinced that the answer lies with the community of Sunderland. We need people to think back to that night. Do they know something that could help us catch Nicky's killer?
Nicky had been told by her mother, Sharon, to go home. But she was seen by several witnesses outside the nearby Boar's Head pub, which was directly opposite the estate. And a short time later, a girl was seen walking along Low Street with a man. Low-grade CCTV from a nearby building shows a figure walking along with what appears to be a child. Police believe this is the last sighting of Nicky. Her shoes and coat were found 12 hours later outside the then derelict Old Exchange building, just a few hundred yards from where she'd last been seen alive. Her body was found inside. Nikki had been hit over the head with a brick and stabbed 37 times.
It's hard for me to think of that, because I just think of how she was murdered, being stabbed all them times, and it were a brick. I can imagine probably her last words were shouting, "Mum."
There's no doubt at all that the murder of a 7-year-old child would have a massive impact on any community, but it had a significant impact on this community in Sunderland, which was particularly close-knit. And it'd be fair to say that that impact has never really left. People still talk about it in the pubs and clubs around Sunderland. It's still something which is talked about in day-to-day talk. It's really important that we find the solution to this so that the whole community, as well as Sharon and her family, can find some peace and some closure.
That somebody can go out there and do that of a child. I cannot understand somebody living with that. I want his killer to be caught, and anybody that's involved to be caught. Because I'll keep fighting on, because I'll not leave it to my other 3 daughters. I don't want them to live the torment like I am.
Well, it's beyond horror, isn't it? I'm joined now by Detective Superintendent Roger Ford, who's leading this case. Absolutely appalling. In the film that we've just shown, we chose to leave out some of the actual crime scene footage for obvious reasons. Can you just take us through the worst parts of this crime and what actually happened here?
Kirsty, this is a truly horrific murder. Nikki had been stabbed over 37 times, then a body dragged into the basement of the building where a body was subsequently found.
The worst imaginable crime, really. And the worst thing about it is nobody yet has been convicted of this murder.
That's right, Kirsty. A number of people have been arrested. One man has been acquitted in 1993, but no one has ever been convicted of this brutal murder. But things change.
Yeah.
2 decades on, people change, circumstances change, people's loyalties change. And I genuinely believe that the answer to this lies within the community of Sunderland, and I would urge them to come forward.
Yes, tonight is the night to do the right thing. Let's just go back then, as I say, 21 years ago. Go back to 1992 and tell me what you know about this little girl's movements that evening.
Yes, well, as we know, she left her grandma's flat around about 9:30. We've got a confirmed sighting outside the Boar's Head Public House at 9:43 p.m.
Right.
We then got a possible sighting of Nikki at 9:51. A witness described seeing a man walking with a child along Low Street towards the Old Exchange building, and that man's described as wearing a white shirt and jeans.
Just remind me about, we saw it in the film, that this little bit of CCTV, now it's pretty grainy, it's not great resolution, but you're pretty sure it's very important.
Most definitely. What we have is the CCTV at 9:57
right.
on the Rose Line building, which faces east along Low Street, shows the grainy figure followed by what looks like a small child. And we believe that's the last confirmed sighting of Nikki.
The people you are keen to speak to tonight, the people who we really want to phone in, are people who were around that area in 1992, who used those buildings, who knew that area in 1992. Just tell them why you need to speak to them.
Yeah. We really need to speak to people who used that building back in 1992. At the time, it was known as the Old Exchange building,
right.
and had been derelict for a number of years. We need to speak to those people. When they went there, who else did they see? Kirsty, this is particularly important because I believe whoever killed Nikki had been inside that building beforehand and knew its layout. And I also believe that someone was there who's seen or heard something, and I would urge them to come forward.
whether they've contacted the police previously or whether they never have before now.
OK, that's really important. Thanks very much, Roger. It's utterly heartbreaking. If you have held back information for all of these years, then I would urge you, tonight is the time to pick up the phone and do the right thing. This is the number you need to call. It's 0500 600 600. Or if you'd prefer, you can speak anonymously. You can do that to Crime Stoppers. There's their number. 0800 555 111. Right, still to come then tonight, we are out with the strike teams as they chase down the gangs suspected of theft and fraud on Britain's transport networks.
This is sending out a clear message. It's not acceptable to commit theft and theft-related offences in the transport network. There'll be consequences for criminal behaviour.
And Matthew reveals how a stamp thief's plan was doomed to failure from the start.
Police raid, get inside! Get inside!
Actually, the trade is really quite a tight-knit community, so it's actually far more difficult to pass them off than you might think.
But first, let's go to Matthew and see what's already come in on the phones.
Well, lots of calls already, and you can see the new information we're getting running at the bottom of the screen. Well, David Rees is investigating that violent jewellery raid in South Wales. He's back with me. And, David, it's not long since we ran the film, but I know you're getting some really interesting calls.
Yeah, we've had 1 or 2 calls basically identifying 3 Eastern European males outside a railway station in the London area, the East London area, selling jewellery, matching the descriptions of the suspects from the offence. And what I want is obviously people to keep on ringing us and giving us the identities of these individuals.
That's exactly what you wanted, and also names, because the images from the CCTV was really clear.
Yeah, what I'd like people to do is concentrate on the CCTV images. Clearly shows good facial identification of the 3 suspects, and I'm sure somebody in the communities in East London know who these individuals are.
All right, well, as we were speaking, I see that more texts, more calls have come in on the computer. I'll let you deal with those. Thanks very much. Martin.
More wanted faces now, starting this time with Jonathan King-Kalea. This shocking footage shows the 31-year-old attacking a couple outside a taxi rank in Redhill in Surrey in 2008. King-Kalea has a Southern Irish accent and several tattoos, including a dragon on his right arm and 2 tattoos of the devil, 1 on his chest and 1 on his back. 6 is Andrew Stevenson Wilson. The 34-year-old convicted robber is wanted after failing to turn up to his probation meetings. Wilson, who was jailed for 7 years for a series of robberies on cash vans, also uses the first names Anthony and Lee. He has links throughout Manchester and to Spain. He's considered dangerous, so don't approach him, just call the police. And lastly tonight is this pair, Daniel Sean Hyde and Robert Fitzgerald. Detectives need to trace them both in connection with a large-scale conspiracy to supply cocaine. 43-year-old Hyde, who also uses the surname Harris, has links to Hastings in Sussex, North London and Bodmin in Cornwall. Whereas 27-year-old Robert Fitzgerald has links to North London and to the Republic of Ireland. Call and text on the usual numbers if you recognise any of tonight's faces. They're all online, and you can have another look by pressing the red button on your remote.
The official stats tell us that crime fell by a further 9% last year, down to its lowest level since the survey began back in 1981. But while the overall trend seems positive, certain types of crime, including mugging and fraud, are actually on the increase. Many victims of these crimes are targeted as they travel on public transport. Martin's been to investigate why it's happening and what's being done about it.
The stations, bus stops and train carriages of our public transport network are familiar spaces, places we might expect to feel safe. But that's not always the case. These incidents are all active police investigations which need your help. Luckily, this woman was unhurt, but badly shaken. But for some, the consequences are far more serious.
It was a nice day. I was talking to people like I normally do whilst on the gates. A man got off the train on the rear carriage. He actually came to me up towards the gate line. He said to me, "I know my rights, you can't effing touch me." Then he just pushed me. I tried to get up. Within 10 seconds, I fell back on the floor and I tried to lift myself up, and it was only a customer where I fell down that he grabbed me back and he said, "You can't do it." He said, there's no way you can get up. He said, "There's going to have to be an ambulance called."
David suffered a double fracture to his right knee. He underwent surgery and spent more than a week in hospital.
Since I've been in left hospital, I've had flashbacks. It was just the thought of just looking at the man, staring at you in the face, and you can see him actually coming towards you and pushing you over. It was just horrendous. I've worked on the railway for 29 years. I've had 6 to 7 days off sick in that time. I've now had to take a month off, which is totally unnecessary, and I feel very frustrated. Very frustrated.
David's life has been turned upside down by a man whose only concern was saving a few pounds by trying to jump the barriers. But it seems that it's not uncommon for fare dodgers to be responsible for more serious offences. British Transport Police cover a huge network, and in Birmingham they've joined up with West Midlands Police to target the criminals.
Thank you very much for your time. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
The bus inspectors are getting on the bus, they're checking people's cards, people's passes to see if they're valid. If they're not valid, they are fined. We then do a police national computer check, because we have found that we do get people who are known to the police and sometimes even wanted by the police.
And that's exactly what happened when officers stopped this man for not having a valid ticket. It turns out he's wanted for something far more serious: possession of indecent images.
Say anything, maybe defence, if you don't mention one question, something later on in court, anything you do say maybe different evidence.
He's now been taken to Stillhouse Lane Police Station and is awaiting interview.
He's been bailed until later this month. Every day, 22 million of us go about our daily business using public transport. But mingling with the commuters are gangs of pickpockets, muggers and opportunistic thieves intent on robbing and conning us when our guards are down. Thefts in particular are on the rise, so British Transport Police say they're making it a priority. They've launched Operation Magnum. And it's strike day in London.
This is a pan-London operation we're going to be involved in this morning. Theft of passenger property as a volume crime perpetrated by organised criminal gangs.
6 teams will raid 13 addresses looking for credit card skimming devices, stolen Oyster cards and mobile phones. It's 4 o'clock in the morning and British Transport Police are heading to an address which they believe is being used by pickpockets and fraudsters. This gang is very professional, highly organised, and these officers are determined to shut them down. Well, Rob, you and your officers have been very, very busy today. What were you looking for and what ultimately did you find?
Yes, we've had a very busy morning, very productive. We've hit 13 addresses this morning. We've made 4 arrests. There's been a number of items which have been recovered of significance this morning, particularly some credit cards, items used in fraud offences, also some mobile phones have been recovered, and some items which we believe be proceeds of crime from pickpocketing related offences.
Now, very, very high profile when we look around as your officers are everywhere. What sort of message is this sending out to the criminals?
This is sending out a clear message that it's not acceptable to commit theft and theft-related offences in the transport network. There'll be consequences for criminal behaviour.
Across the whole day of action in London for Operation Magnum, 35 arrests were made. And through operations like these, police say they're determined to catch the criminals. Crime on public transport is still relatively low compared to the millions of journeys made. But while many of the incidents take just seconds, the consequences for the victims last much longer.
That's for sure. Well, joining me now are Chief Superintendent Paul Brogden from British Transport Police and Laura Bates, who, I'm afraid to say, was herself groped on a bus, and she campaigns against sexual harassment now. Paul, first, just to clarify, British Transport Police, what's your remit?
We police a rail network across England, Scotland and Wales. We don't usually police the motorways, the roads, the bus networks. This is done by the local police forces.
Right. We're going to take a look at that CCTV just to give people a chance to see it again. While we're looking at it, why do you think it is that the transport system seems to sort of have a magnetic attraction to criminals?
Well, the transport network is extremely busy. It can often be confusing or distracting for members of the public. Yeah. Criminals know this and take advantage of it. In particular, we have organised criminal gangs targeting offences such as pickpocketing. That's why the British Transport Police has launched Operation Magnum to crack down on these offences. And in particular, we want to allow the public to understand the tactics that these thieves use so that they can also protect their belongings and assist us by reporting suspicious activity.
Sure. I want people at home just to take a look at another piece of CCTV that we have. This is on the 52A bus in Exeter. It was Devon and Cornwall Police that gave us this. Now, this man gets on. You'll see he's pretty distinctively dressed. Got a very good view of his face there. He then sits down. This happened on April the 8th. And he begins on that bus to masturbate. I should tell you he's doing this in front of 2 teenage girls. As I say, we do get a very good view of his face. If you'd like to look at it again on our website, you're very welcome to do that. Laura, I mentioned that that's really shocking to me. I'm afraid maybe not quite so shocking to you because something very similar to that happened to you.
Yes, one experience just like that where a man masturbated next to me on the bus, and another where a man sat down next to me and started stroking and groping my legs. And I was actually on the phone, so I said out loud what was happening, that he was groping me. And all around me on that bus, everybody looked away, nobody stepped in. It sent me a real message: this is normal, get on with it, just deal with it. So I started the Everyday Sexism Project to try and encourage other women to speak out and tell their stories. And we've heard from over 45,000 women.
Wow.
So we've been able to use some of those stories to assist the British Transport Police in really cracking down on these sexual offences.
I mean, just briefly, you're sitting there, you're very calm and composed. At the time, you must have, apart from being revolted, you must have been furious.
I was, and I'm even more angry now when we're getting the stories in from it happening to schoolgirls who don't realise it's a crime and they can report it.
They certainly can. What are you doing to help women who are subjected to this sort of stuff?
Well, we treat this crime extremely seriously. It's vitally important that victims such as Laura have the confidence to report this to the police. We want to support those victims and target the offenders.
Yeah, really important. You'll listen to them, and it is a crime. Thank you both very much. You can take another look at that CCTV, very good view of that man's face, and all of those cases on the website. If you can help, if you've got names, I would urge you please to get in touch. It's a crime. And of course, if you've been a victim of crime, there's the victim support line. They're on 0845 30 30 900 to help you. Over to Martin.
Time now for more CCTV, starting with a rather haphazard heist in Hertfordshire. 3 masked men rush into a jeweller's shop in the Into shopping centre in Watford on a Friday morning last November. The gang, who seem to be struggling with their disguises, are armed with hammers and order the staff into the back of the shop. But the would-be robbers seem a little confused as to what's supposed to happen next. Eventually, they start to attack the display cabinets, but despite some acrobatic moves, they still fail to break the glass. They quickly give up and flee empty-handed. We need you to name these rather rubbish robbers tonight. inside a busy city centre bar in Leeds during the early hours of a Sunday morning in June. A tall guy in a checked shirt has a word with a fellow drinker after he'd accidentally knocked into the girl he's with. It all seems amiable enough until the guy in the check puts his hand on the back of the other man's neck and pulls him closer before headbutting him repeatedly to the face. The victim suffered serious injuries as a result of this attack. Name the man responsible. It's late on a Thursday evening last month inside the Spa store in Thelwall New Road in Warrington. A gang of 4 men have smashed their way into the shop. Inside, they climb over the counter and force their way into the cabinet containing the cigarettes using a crowbar. They start to fill a duvet cover full of fags, but their tampering with the cabinet sets off the special security device, filling the air with smoke. Despite not being able to see much, the gang managed to get into the back office and steal more cigarettes and some petty cash. They're not easy to see, but can you smoke out these cigarette thieves? Names, please. All tonight's CCTV is online, and if you recognise anyone, please call and text the numbers on screen. Now, let's have a quick look at some really excellent results on some of our CCTV appeals recently.
Now, last year we showed you this footage of a man who indecently assaulted a young girl in a supermarket in Harrow in North London in March 2012. Well, as a direct result of calls from Crimewatch viewers, that man was identified as 83-year-old John Hayford from Dorset. And last month he was sentenced to 21 months in prison, suspended for 2 years after pleading guilty to sexually assaulting a child under 13. Well, on the night of the appeal, police received several anonymous calls from people who also said they'd been assaulted by Hayford. Detectives would like them to get back in touch, and you can speak directly to an officer now on 07901 515 310, or you can call Crime Stoppers on 0800 555 111.
Earlier this year, we asked for your help to identify the man responsible for this very nasty attack in Wealdstone in February, during which the 18-year-old victim had his skull fractured with a hammer. Well, Crimewatch viewers helped identify the man as 30-year-old Brian Moore from Hatfield in Hertfordshire, and 2 weeks ago he was sentenced to 5 years, 3 months in prison for grievous bodily harm and possession of an offensive weapon. His victim, who woke up in hospital with no recollection of the attack, is delighted that one call made such a difference.
Well, me and my family are really thankful to the person that called in, because they've helped my family a lot, knowing that I can go out and be safe, and it's just generally it was the best feeling ever for me as well, knowing that someone called in and someone actually out there is willing to help another person out with such a serious case. So if it wasn't for Crimewatch, you wouldn't be in prison now.
Finally, last November we showed you this footage of a woman being robbed at gunpoint as she made her way home in Stanmore in North London in February 2012. Well, viewers recognised the men responsible as 21-year-old Vishal Pawar of Gaydon Lane, London on the left, and 19-year-old Zain Andani of Marsh Lane, Stanmore. Last week they were each sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. The victim in that attack has told us what it meant to see them face justice.
When I heard that they'd been caught, I was just absolutely amazed and thankful, because, you know, these people need to get what they deserve. And obviously, them being off the streets as well, they're not going to be doing it to anyone else. So that was really, you know, it was an amazing feeling, the fact that they'd been caught.
Now, there have been some pretty spectacular heists in the news recently, not least the £90 million diamond raid in Cannes this summer. But thieves don't always think quite so big, and they certainly not always so successful.
In 2008, career criminal Craig Townend decided to steal a collection of rare and valuable stamps.
Craig Townend did a lot of research. He'd learnt enough in order to pass off as somebody that certainly had a working knowledge of stamps and the trade.
Townend's target was a small stamp dealer in Devon. In the months leading up to the robbery, he made several phone calls to the shop using the cover story that he'd recently inherited some money and wanted to invest in stamps.
I'm Charles DeVille.
Oh, yes, of course.
He took on a different identity. He used the name Charles DeVille.
For the whole collection.
He found out the stamps were certainly worth an awful lot of money.
But Townend had a problem. It was the high summer and the area was teeming with tourists and locals, all potential witnesses. Stealing the stamps from the shop may not be the best plan.
At that time, he made a decision that if he was going to get hold of the stamps, that he'd have to trace the businessman back to his home address.
To get his hands on the collection, Townend decided that he and an accomplice would adopt another guise.
We had a report in that two males had gone to an address, that they'd purported to be police officers, that they'd brandished handguns, and tried to give the impression to the homeowner that they were police officers carrying out a raid.
Police raid, get inside! Get inside! Give me money laundering £50,000. What are you talking about? Is anybody else in the house? That's my son.
Whilst he was being restrained, the firearm was actually discharged.
On the floor, down there. Where are the stamps? They're in my briefcase over there.
Despite having previously visited the dealer's shop and turning up pretending to be policemen, bizarrely, it was only now that Townend and his accomplice decided to cover their faces as they made off with their collection worth £400,000. Townend thought he'd got away with it, but he still had to sell the stamps on.
Stamps can have very high value, so they are quite an obvious target, but actually the trade is really quite a tight-knit community, so it's actually far more difficult to pass them off than you might think.
In London, 200 miles away from the scene of the crime, Townend then set about reinventing himself into yet another fictional character, this time to try to offload the stamps.
I'm from Stamps of Mayfair, just on Regent Street.
He named himself the Laird of Glencairn and had gone to some effort in order to convince people he was a high-level, legitimate businessman.
Deal done.
Thank you.
But Townend didn't realise how identifiable the stamps would be.
Colour, margins, postmarks, all of these things combine in an individual stamp to give it a fingerprint.
News of the theft had, by this time, spread around the relatively small world of stamp collecting. Despite that, Townend did manage to pull off a £10,000 sale to a London dealer. But the self-styled Laird of Glencairn then made his most foolish mistake yet.
What name do you want it made out to, sir?
Craig Townend.
Craig Townend.
When the dealer discovered the stamps were stolen, he reported the name to the police. It then emerged that Townend had tried something similar before. 10 years earlier, he and an accomplice carried out an armed raid on the York City Art Gallery, stealing more than £1 million worth of fine art. But he was later caught red-handed as he posed as a dealer, trying to sell on the stolen works, and was sentenced to 15 years. Once released, he was soon up to his old tricks. A decade later, and having secured his first successful stamp sale, detectives were convinced Townend would return to the same North London dealer. And they were right. But this time, the police were ready.
Craig Townend, you're under arrest on suspicion of armed robbery.
I believe Craig Townend is a fantasist. The use of masks, pretending to be a police officer, setting himself up as a completely different identity in order to sell these stamps on.
But despite constantly reinventing himself, the true identity of the stamps was never in doubt, and his plan was doomed from the start. Townend was convicted of robbery and sentenced to life in prison.
Life in prison, for the Laird of Glencairn, with a minimum of 10 years, yeah?
Yes, life, because there were so many aggravating factors. It was a terrifying attack. Hooded, guns pressed to your head, shots being fired. Even after the robbery, Townend sent the stamp dealer a bereavement card as a way of warning him off helping the police. The judge described that as pure threat. And all of that, of course, from someone just released from prison for another vicious armed robbery. So that's why he got life.
And Matthew, in court itself, his defence really backfired on him.
It did, incredibly. In the moments before the stamp dealer's son was tied up, he managed to flick his mobile phone into record mode, and he recorded video and some audio of Townend searching the property, so he couldn't deny he was there. So instead, he claimed the stamp dealer was a money launderer for a criminal gang who'd hired him to fake a robbery to clear a debt. Now, the problem with making such an outlandish claim like that, firstly, it wasn't true, and secondly, it entitled the prosecution to put forward evidence of Townend's bad character. And that meant the jury could hear all the details of that York armed robbery, which was very similar to this, all the details of his previous conviction, so it totally backfired.
And what about what he actually chose to steal? I mean, these stamps, unique is not too strong a word, these valuable stamps.
No, I mean, he thought, steal them, sell them, easy.
Yeah.
What he didn't know was that every stamp has minute differences, and those differences are all catalogued by the stamp dealers. So, for example, if you tear two stamps apart along the perforations, some of the perforations will tear long, some of the perforations will tear short. Under a microscope, you can never do it the same way twice. So the stamps, in a sense, have fingerprints. Townend had his criminal fingerprints, and they were all over this.
There we are. Matthew, thanks very much. Time now for a quick last update on what's come in on the phones tonight. Here's Martin.
Well, we've had an excellent response to that reconstruction we showed you on the robbery in Porthcawl. One call in particular, 3 men matching the description of the suspects we saw in the CCTV. They have been seen outside a train station in East London selling jewellery. The vehicle has also given us a few leads. That was seen in the same area of East London in June and July. Keep those calls coming in. And the theft of the mobile phone from a train at the Seven Kings station. Lots of calls coming in on this one. The same name coming up time and time again.
OK, that's everything for now. But remember, all of tonight's reconstruction, CCTV, the wanted faces, they're all on the website. It's bbc.co.uk/crimewatch. And those wanted faces stay on the red button until midnight tonight. Please take another look if you can. You can also stay up to date with how the cases progress via Twitter. Follow @BBC Crimewatch. The phone lines, they're going to stay open until midnight tomorrow night. We're going to be back again tonight, of course, 10:35 after the news, with the very latest on, I think, what looks to have been a pretty busy night tonight. For now, from me and all the team, thanks for your calls. They really make a difference. Good night.